U.S. President Donald Trump has announced tonight he is terminating trade talks with Canada, blaming an anti-tariff ad by Ontario for the reason.
British Columbia announced that the U.S. government has paused negotiations on the expansive Columbia River Treaty, saying the current administration is reviewing its international engagements.
Continue to point out between 80 and 90% of Canadian goods going to the U.S. are not tariffed. But they add, this trade war is a reminder of why Canada needs to find new trading partners.
Trump just tried to take control of Canada's biggest port. Do not negotiate, not a request. Take. Carney said no. And within hours, American supply chains started cracking. $550 billion in trade, hanging by a thread. Washington was certain Canada would fold. It didn't. How did the smaller country end up holding all the cards? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly why Washington's biggest pressure move just backfired. But there is one detail buried inside this story that nobody is reporting, and it changes everything. Before we continue, hit subscribe. We need 500 likes and 250 comments on this one. Comment on one word, Canada or USA. Now let's get in. This is bigger than a port. When the most powerful economy on earth makes a demand, the world expects a yes. That has been the rule for decades. But right now, that rule is broken. The consequences are not contained to Ottawa or Washington. They are moving through shipping contracts in Tokyo, investment boardrooms in Brussels, and trade negotiations in Seoul. This is not a border dispute. It is a live test of who actually holds power in the modern global economy. Here's the detail nobody is talking about. American companies, not Canadian, not European, American companies are now lobbying against their own government. Because the Port of Washington tried to weaponize, their cargo is locked inside it. Keep watching, because this is where it gets uncomfortable for Washington. In early 2026, the Trump administration crossed a line no administration had crossed before. This was no longer about tariffs. Washington was signaling direct demand for operational influence over Canadian ports and cross-border logistics infrastructure. The demand came attached to the existing 25% tariff regime, already cutting deep into Canadian exports since 2025. The message was not subtle. Cooperate, or the pressure gets worse. Mark Carney did not blink. Canadian ports, Canadian infrastructure, Canadian supply chains, all of it falls under Canadian sovereignty. None of it is subject to foreign operational control. Ottawa then made a second move that sent an even louder signal. Within the same week, Canada announced it was fast-tracking trade talks with the European Union, the United Kingdom, and Indo-Pacific partners. That was not a reaction. That was a strategy, and Washington had not prepared for it. But the numbers reveal just how much is actually at stake. The Port of Vancouver is the largest in Canada, third largest in all of North America by tonnage. Every year it moves grain, potash, coal, and energy products across the Pacific. This is not a symbolic target. This is the physical backbone of continental trade. Canada ships approximately $50 billion in goods to the United States every single month. Is why Washington always assumed it held the leverage. That assumption is now crumbling. Trump's tariffs have already slashed bilateral trade volume by an estimated 8 to 12% since early 2025. And then Carney's government invoked Section 92A of Canada's Constitution Act, the Natural Resources Sovereignty Clause. That is not a press release. That is a legal weapon. Canada is using its own constitution as a wall against U.S. economic pressure. Washington has no clean, legal answer to that move. And this is where the situation takes a turn nobody predicted. To understand how dramatic this shift is, you need to see what normal used to look like. For decades, the Canada-U.S. trade relationship was the most frictionless in the world. CUSMA, the deal that replaced NAFTA, built supply chains so deeply connected that the border barely existed for commerce. Canadian ports were never a flashpoint. Both countries moved goods. Both countries made money. That world ended in 2025. Trump came back with aggressive tariff pressure and began questioning whether Canadian infrastructure served American interests, targeting Pacific exports through Vancouver specifically. Mark Carney did not enter office as a fighter. He is a former central banker, a global finance architect. His career was built on calm, measured precision. That is exactly why his language now carries so much weight. When a man like Carney invokes sovereignty, it is not a slogan. It is a declaration. The damage is already spreading in both directions. Canadian grain farmers in Saskatchewan and Alberta are being hit twice simultaneously. Tariffs have cut U.S. market access. Now port uncertainty is adding a second crisis on top of the first. American importers are not immune. Companies routing Asian goods through Vancouver are pricing geopolitical risk into contracts for the first time. That cost did not exist 2 years ago. The Canadian dollar has swung with every escalation, creating borrowing instability across both currencies. And Canadian manufacturers built around CUSMA assumptions are now pivoting hard toward Europe and Asia. Washington pushed harder, and Canada became more valuable to everyone else. The U is now actively courting Canada as a stable supply chain partner. So are Japan, South Korea, and Australia. Not out of sympathy, out of cold strategic calculation. The Port of Vancouver, the exact asset Trump tried to weaponize, is now drawing new long-term shipping agreements from Asian partners precisely because Canada refused to bend. Washington's pressure campaign produced the one outcome it was designed to prevent. It turned Canada into one of the most sought-after trade partners on Earth. This standoff is exposing something Washington got fundamentally wrong. The leverage playbook that works on smaller economies does not work on Canada. Canada controls ports moving $500 billion in trade. It sits on critical minerals the U.S. tech sector needs. It controls fresh water with no American substitute. For Carney, every refusal builds Canada's reputation as a sovereign, reliable partner in every capital now watching. Brussels is watching. Tokyo is watching. Seoul is watching. Middle power countries are treating this as a live test case. Can a country defend its economic sovereignty against a superpower? Canada is answering yes, in real time. And the most telling signal is coming from inside the United States itself. American exporters, energy companies, and Pacific trade importers are quietly lobbying against their own government's position. This is not a dispute that ends with one negotiation round. If Canada locks in European and Asian partnerships before Washington changes course, the United States may realize it spent enormous political capital to accelerate the exact outcome it was trying to stop. The smaller country walked away with the leverage. The world took note. And this story is far from over. If this analysis is what you come here for, subscribe now. The next move may be the most consequential one yet.